the Titans. Walk me through what their decision's going to be walking into the combine this week, Mike.
Yeah, I think, Rich, first and foremost, and it's the same thing for Cleveland from an exercise perspective at number two, is you got to evaluate those two quarterbacks because by definition, you can have one of them if you fall in love with them, right? So if you think Cam Ward or Shador Sanders is your quarterback, your guy of the future, you got to go get one. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have a franchise quarterback, you're just another day closer to getting fired. So that's what's going to drive their initial evaluation is those two kids. Now, if they don't believe they're the long-term answer, then the next level is, okay, is it Abdul Carter or is it the Travis Hunter? They're probably the next two, and they're both difference makers for different reasons, and both very capable of going one or two. And then the third option is you got to be open for business. I think both teams, you've got to be wide open for business because if that quarterback evaluation is either bad or has you sitting on the fence, you've got to know prior to draft day whether or not you'll move down. You can move down now, you can move down later, but how far down do you want to go? Where do you think that next gap is? So there's an awful lot of evaluations, and it's too early for, I'm sure, for Borgonzi in Tennessee or Andrew Berry in Cleveland to have made any decisions. But first and foremost, you got to know if you fall in love with one or both of those quarterbacks.
Well, and obviously there's a moving part that says I want to be moved, and Cleveland says, as of right now, no chance. I mean, the Titans don't have a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer raising his hand saying I want out of here like the Browns have with Myles Garrett. How do you think that all plays into this week for Andrew Berry, Mike?
Well, we know what Cleveland is saying right now.
Yep.
They're 2 years removed from being 11-5 with Joe Flacco at quarterback. I think they feel like they want to compete. They get 9 draft picks this year for the first time since 21, a first-round draft pick because of that awful Deshaun Watson trade. So, look, that defensive end is probably the best player, and he might be the best defensive player in the league. He's 29 years old. He's got 3 or 4 more big years in him, I believe. So I think they have to be open for business on him also. And I think you're saying the right things. We're not going to move him, but I think you got to listen to people because I think it starts with 2 first-round draft picks plus maybe another draft pick or 2, maybe an existing good football player on the other team. But I think you got to be open for business. And at a certain point, you got to be honest with yourself. How good are we going to be? And what is the answer at quarterback? Are we going to have one of those, 37-year-old bridge quarterbacks? Are we going to draft a rookie? Are we going to do both? But can we compete this year? And what can Myles Garrett get us on the open market?
And in terms of that, right? I mean, if you think Abdul Carter is that great and he's available in this draft for you, and Myles wants out, and you can not, you just mentioned how many draft choices they already have, and how significant it is because of, as you referred to it, and I rightfully so, awful Deshaun Watson trade. You just mentioned a killing that you can get for him, and you, having drafted the Condor, know how difficult it is to find a difference maker of the first variety at this position. What would you give up for Garrett? Would you give up what you just said you think you would ask for if you were the GM selling? Would you give that up for Garrett?
Well, pick a team that needs a DN like Detroit. You got Aiden Hutchinson on one side. You've got one of the better rosters in football. You draft extremely well. But you got this dude sitting out there in Cleveland. Would you give up a couple first-round picks and a player or two?
Heck yeah.
And bring in a 29-year-old Myles Garrett and pair him with Aiden Hutchinson?
Heck yeah.
I'd be really interested in that on both sides of that particular equation.
What about Washington, right? What about Washington? Yeah. Even though they're plus you're naming 2 teams that are really down on that first round. I mean, if you're Cleveland, wouldn't you want to try and send Garrett to somebody way higher up on the first round food chain? Wouldn't that be part of your equation too? Do you think
if I was Cleveland, I'd be thinking a couple things. One, I would try to backload this deal a little bit because if I need to get a quarterback and I'm not interested in one of the two this year. There's potentially a much deeper quarterback class next year. So maybe I'm trying to back end some of those draft picks would give me ammunition to move up next year and get my guy. But yeah, I mean, I'd also like him to go to the NFC, to be really honest with you, Rich. And, and there's so many different parts of this conversation. Of course, you'd like to move up in the first round, but I think you're looking team by team, and you've got a little bit of a different compensation coming in from all of them, depending on what they're, where they're picking. Getting the third overall pick versus get the 28th overall pick is a big deal. So for sure, all that comes into the equation under value and what you'll accept or not accept.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.